There are upsets in the history of the Academy Awards that the culture absorbs as injustices, and upsets that the culture eventually accepts as correct. The 1940 ceremony, honoring the films of 1939, a year so rich in major Hollywood productions that it has been called the greatest year in cinema history, produced one of the most discussed results in the Academy's existence. Clark Gable was the presumptive winner. Gone with the Wind was the presumptive film. Rhett Butler was the role that an entire country had decided, before the envelopes were opened, belonged in the winner's column. And a quiet Englishman with chronic asthma, who had spent the previous months battling his own lungs on a film set in England, received the award instead. Robert Donat won. Clark Gable did not. And the result was not, despite the shock of the moment, an injustice. It was simply the correct outcome, awarded by people who had watched both performances and made an honest assessment. Frederick Robert Donat was born on March 18, 1905, in Withington, Manchester, England, the son of a Polish-born father and an English mother, in a household of modest means and considerable domestic tension. He was a sensitive child in the way that sensitive children are sensitive, not fragile exactly, but tuned to emotional frequencies that others were not receiving, responsive to the world with an intensity that made ordinary life both more vivid and more exhausting than it was for people of less acute perception. He discovered acting as a teenager through elocution lessons taken to address a stutter, which is one of those biographical facts that contains an entire philosophy. The idea that the disability and the cure and the art form it produced were not separate events, but a single continuous story. He trained and worked in repertory theater in the north of England through the late 1920s, building the technique that would eventually produce the voice, a baritone of unusual warmth and precision, capable of conveying emotional complexity through inflection alone, the kind of voice that actors spend careers trying to develop, and that Donat simply had, deepened by training into something that directors and audiences experienced as almost physical in its impact. The voice was the instrument. Everything else, the face, the bearing, the specific quality of stillness he brought to a scene, was the frame around it. Hollywood found him in the early 1930s and offered him what Hollywood offered its most attractive prospects: enormous contracts, guaranteed stardom, the machinery of the most powerful entertainment industry in the world pointed in his direction. He declined, selectively and consistently, with the polite immovability of a man who had decided what he valued and who found that the Hollywood offer, while financially impressive, did not align with the values he had decided on. He accepted some projects. The Count of Monte Cristo in 1934 established his international reputation, and Alfred Hitchcock's The 39 Steps, in 1935, gave him the role that demonstrated to anyone who might have doubted it that the stage actor from Manchester possessed a screen presence of the first order, light and funny and genuinely charming in the specific way that Hitchcock's best films required. But the offered roles he turned down constitute a catalog of what Hollywood's golden age might have been with different casting. Captain Blood, the role that made Errol Flynn a star. The role of Maxime de Winter in Rebecca, which eventually went to Laurence Olivier. Various other projects that the studio system had designed around his specific combination of English elegance and emotional depth. He turned them down or accepted, and then withdrew due to his health, or negotiated terms that the studios found incompatible with their methods of doing business. He preferred England. He preferred the stage. He preferred the misty northern air, which his lungs required, to the California sunshine, which his career would have benefited from. The asthma was not a background condition. It was a central fact of his professional and personal life, an illness of sufficient severity that each film he made was a physical battle conducted simultaneously with the creative one. that the question of whether he would be able to perform on any given day was genuine rather than rhetorical, that the career he built was built against the specific resistance of a body that regularly refused to cooperate with what the talent required of it. He powered through with the specific determination of someone who has decided that the work is worth the cost, but the cost was real, and it was cumulative, and it shaped everything: his choices, his limitations, his ultimate trajectory. Goodbye, Mr. Chips arrived in 1939, directed by Sam Wood from James Hilton's beloved novel about a retiring schoolteacher looking back on a lifetime of service to his students, his school, and the woman he loved and lost. The role required an actor to age from young man to elderly one across the span of the film, to carry the full weight of a life's accumulated meaning in the face and the voice and the posture, to make the audience feel the specific, quiet grief of a man who has lived well and who knows it, and who is grateful in the way that people are grateful when they understand what they have been given. Donut did not play Mr. Chips, he became him. The transformation across the film's timeline was not cosmetic, but essential. The young teacher and the old one shared a continuous interior life that Donut maintained with absolute consistency, so that the audience's experience of watching the character age was the experience of watching a person they already knew move through time, rather than the experience of watching an actor demonstrate range. It was, by the common consensus of critics and colleagues, one of the great screen performances of the era. It won him the Oscar. It was correct that it did. He made relatively few films after 1939. The asthma, the war years, the preference for the stage, and the specific combination of perfectionism and poor health that made each project an extended negotiation with his own physical limitations, all contributed to a filmography that was smaller than his reputation suggested. The Winslow Boy in 1948, The Magic Box in 1951, Lease of Life in 1954. Each film made with the full seriousness of a man who understood that the work was worth doing properly, or not at all, and each film demonstrating that the talent had not diminished even as the body that housed it continued its long argument with the air. He died on June 9, 1958, in London, at the age of 53, of a cerebral thrombosis during the filming of The Inn of the Sixth Happiness. He had been ill throughout the production, performing scenes while physically compromised in ways that the film does not show because the professionalism held even when the body was failing. His final scene in the film, in which his character says goodbye to Ingrid Bergman's missionary and walks away into the distance, was completed. He died the day after filming wrapped. He had said that acting was a form of nervous breakdown, and the description was accurate in the way that only descriptions made from the inside of an experience are accurate. The intensity he brought to the work was not manufactured. It came from a man who had been sensitive since childhood, who had transformed a stutter into a voice that moved people to tears, who had fought for breath on every film set he ever worked on and had produced, in between the fighting, performances of such emotional truth that the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences had judged them superior to the performance of the most popular actor in the world in the most popular film of the year. He beat Clark Gable, not by being louder or larger or more glamorous, by being, in front of a camera, the truest version of a man who had lived a quiet life of genuine meaning, and by making the audience feel for 2 hours that they had lived it too. The gentleness was not weakness. It was the whole point.